Okay, so we have a huge final season of Game of Thrones to talk about. Now, we originally posted our reaction to the season premiere, and as I mentioned before, I hadn't really planned to do any more Game of Thrones content until the finale. But there is some things that I've been thinking about recently that I wanted to kind of float out there regarding theories and some things that, as I'm just watching the season kind of wind down and watching things unfold, I got to thinking about a couple theories. And everybody has a theory about Game of Thrones. I've read so many fan theories and I've heard so many ideas, and I thought I would bring to you what I consider to be the three main things I am predicting to happen this final season of Game of Thrones by the season finale. Now, I just want to put it out there. This is not spoilerish because I have no idea if any of this is remotely on point. This is not based on any theories I've read. As far as I know, this is an original thought. So if it does come through, it's not. If it does come true, it's not spoilerish. It's just me getting lucky. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you three things that I think could potentially happen by the end of the final season. I'm going to talk about who I think is going to live and die. I'm going to tell you who I think is going to end up on the Iron Throne. And then at the end, I'm going to throw in kind of a crazy little kind of what if scenario at the end, which might be a little far-fetched, but you never know. And I think it's one of those things where if it does come true, even I'll be surprised. But it's not incredibly off the wall. It's not that impossible. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is the body count. And obviously Game of Thrones is known for having a big one. There are a couple people that I think it's very unlikely they're going to survive to the end of this show. A lot of people have been talking about the Hound versus the Mountain, that battle that's everybody wants to see take place and is hoping is going to take place. I would assume that everybody thinks the Hound is going to kill his brother. I would assume that's the case. I will tell you, it's very unlikely that both of them survive. So one or the other, and honestly, I'm not going to call that. I'm not sure, because I think it's just as likely that the Hound could get killed as the Mountain. So I'm not sure which one survives. I can tell you that both of them will not. There's no way. I think Theon is done. I think he's got to go out probably trying to redeem himself, maybe protecting Sansa, something along those lines. I think the two biggest ones that people are talking about are Jon and Daenerys. I think it's a safe bet to say that both of those characters are not going to make it. I will say one is going to, but you're not going to see both. It's very unlikely both of them make it out of this show alive. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say that I think it's actually going to be Jon. Not because I think Daenerys is going to end up on the Iron Throne, by the way. But with Jon, I think it's easy to knock him off because, first of all, obviously he's already died and then came back. The fact that they did that once, and then people aren't really going to be expecting. I think most people assume that because they killed him off and then brought him back, they're not going to kill him again. So I think that in and of itself would be a kind of a swerve where people wouldn't see it coming. But the other thing is, Jon has kind of ran his course as a character. It's not to say he's a bad character, and it's not to say that I don't like him or he should go just because he's bad or anything like that. It's just he's did what he needed to do as a character. I think his complete story arc now is done. There's really nothing left for him to do. And I think if he were to die right at this point, it would be fine. There's nothing that's going to be left. There's going to be no loose ends from that particular death. Daenerys, on the other hand, here's why her not dying is even worse than death. Because this is a character who has craved power this entire series. She's somebody that has absolutely wanted the throne. She has worked the entire series to acquire this power and go after this thing that she wants so desperately. For her not to get that at this point, and in fact, for not only her not to get that, but to maybe see all of these people that have been depending on her, that look to her for protection, to where maybe she's not able to protect them. Maybe they get killed, or maybe they get enslaved. Maybe her dragons die. Maybe the Dothraki either abandon her, or maybe she gets enslaved again, because again, she was sold into slavery with the whole Khal Drogo situation. She was essentially, a slave. She was sold into slavery. What if she ends up basically back where she started? You assume she's going to, ascend to the rank of queen and rule. What if she ends up going in the opposite direction, where she ends up not achieving any of her goals and essentially being a complete and total failure? If she were here today, if she was a real person standing right here, I'm sure she would probably tell you that is a fate worse than death. So I would like to, not that I would like to see it, but if I did see that, it wouldn't surprise me. Because again, I think it's very unlikely that she's going to end up on the Iron Throne, just because it's too heavy-handed. It's too... Game of Thrones never goes down the path you think it's going to. It always throws you a swerve. And they've been building to that moment of her being on the throne for seasons. Like, I don't even know how many seasons now. So there's no way that that's how it ends, because that's not how anything ends in Game of Thrones. But if she's not going to end up on the Iron Throne, and I think everyone assumes that Cersei was never going to stay on the Iron Throne, that was always a temporary situation, that brings us to our second prediction. Who ends up on the Iron Throne? So I can tell you it's not going to be a Lannister. It's probably not going to be a Targaryen. It's probably not going to be anyone living at all. Because I think it's very likely, completely possible, that the Night King not only wins, but takes the throne. And when I say takes the throne, I mean he essentially conquers Westeros. I doubt that he has any interest in being on the throne himself. And here's why I say that. Okay, so they have been setting up the White Walkers as the threat in the world of Game of Thrones, like the most dangerous threat that exists. This ancient evil that's returned. They've been doing it since the first episode. If you remember, Ned Stark had to behead a member of the Night's Watch for abandoning his post. The reason he did that is because he got so scared after seeing a White Walker, and then of course, Ned Stark doesn't believe him, so he just figures he's a deserter. They started with episode 1. And each season, the threat of the Night King and the White Walkers have gotten... It's grown and grown and grown. Now, I don't know how many of you have seen the original Raiders of the Lost Ark. I'm sure a lot of you have, I'm sure. But if you haven't, there's this really funny scene where Indiana Jones is confronted by this really badass character who has this sword, and he's spinning it around, and he's doing all this crazy stuff, and he's going to fight Indy, and Indy literally just takes out his gun, and one shot, boom, kills him. It's like a 2-second scene. The guy is just done like that. If the Night King is beaten so easily, that would essentially be like getting knocked out in the first round by the first punch in a boxing match. How can they have built up this character and this threat for so long to have it not go anywhere, to have it mean absolutely nothing? The Night King takes over captures one of Daenerys' dragons and turns it. They destroy the wall. They're marching to Winterfell in the next episode. If all of that just goes away, what was the point? There was no point to any of it. If you go back and watch the series after that, you're just going to realize, well, nobody's going to care about the threat of the White Walkers, because it didn't go anywhere. They were easily defeated, and that's it. Here's why I think that's not going to happen. For exactly that reason. They have to win. And I'm not just talking about at Winterfell. The Winterfell battle, I think, is going to be a prelude to the bigger battle, where the Night King has got to be victorious in some manner. It's the same situation with Thanos and the Infinity Gauntlet. Imagine if they set up 10 years worth of movies in the Marvel movies leading to the battle with Thanos, and then Thanos didn't win. That would have been cutting the legs out from under that whole decade-long worth decades long worth of movies for it to just not go anywhere. So that's why it was so important for Thanos to win and do the snap and be victorious in his mission, because it justified, it validated all of that setup from the other Marvel films. That's exactly the situation we're in here with the Night King. He's got to win. He has to. There's no point to this show if he doesn't. So that's my prediction. The Night King takes it. Now, also, there is a little bit of a tease. If you go back into either season 2 or 3, I'm not sure what it is. If you remember, Daenerys does have a vision of the Iron Throne. But it's essentially the Red Keep that has been burned out and destroyed, and it's snowing, and it's all iced over. So is she seeing a vision of what's going to happen? Meaning that the Night King and the White Walkers are going to be victorious? Are they going to actually destroy Westeros and take over? To me, that's the only scenario that works. I don't know how else they could do it, but for my money, my money's on the Night King. But that brings us to the third prediction, because if the Night King wins, you can't leave the show like that, because that would be kind of a bummer. You can't do that. So how would they allow the Night King to win, but then also wrap up the show in a satisfying way? Because a lot of the actors that have already done interviews have said the show is going to end on a sad note, but a satisfying note. Meaning you're not going to be terribly happy with every aspect of the show, depending on which characters you like, but you'll be satisfied. It'll be a satisfying ending. So how do they allow the Night King to get a win, but then also get out of that to wrap up the show in a way that works? Well, here's my idea. There is a mechanic that they're using now more than ever in television series, not so much movies, but like in TV series between seasons, and sometimes even between episodes. They have started doing time jumps where one season, or even sometimes between 1 or 2 episodes, they will jump 5 years, 10 years ahead in order to shove the story along in a way to where they can they've either written themselves into a corner, or there's really nowhere else they can go, so they jump ahead in the timeline, and then it opens up new story possibilities. Is that what's going to happen in this season of Game of Thrones by the end? Could the Night King maybe get the win by, say, halfway through the series? Because I think there's only 6 episodes total. So by, say, episode 3 or 4, could it be a situation where he's victorious and then the last, say, 2 to 3 episodes is a time jump? Because we already know that the first 3 or 4 episodes are only an hour. They're actually less than an hour. I think they're like 58 minutes, 54 minutes. And then the last 2 or 3 episodes are an hour and a half or 80 minutes. Could those episodes take place years later, with the ruined kingdom of men finally coming together under one banner to then retake Westeros and fight back the Night King? Because another thing that accomplishes is the fact that Westeros is kind of a screwed up place to live. They call it the Seven Kingdoms, but the point is, just about every other house in this kingdom is corrupt. Nobody is really under one rule. If the Night King wins and kind of wipes all that out, it's kind of hitting the reset button. So the kingdom then has the opportunity, once they defeat the Night King and the White Walkers, to kind of reset and maybe come together under one kingdom with one king or one queen and actually exist in peace and in the right way. Now, is that going to happen? I don't know. I mean, it's one of those situations where I'm plucking this out of thin air based on where I see some of these story arcs going. I can tell you this. By the last few minutes of the season finale, and we will be live streaming, I'm sure, a reaction to the season finale. We'll be talking about that and doing some content. So definitely come back here and check that out. But I mean, I think we have a little over a month before the season finale. I know this is one of those shows that, for me, it was always must-watch television. I haven't always been happy with the direction they've taken it in. I can tell you that I quit the show after season 1. I completely quit the show because, you'll hear this a lot, I was heartbroken when they took Ned Stark's head off, because I love Sean Bean. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan, and when I heard about Game of Thrones, I'm like, great, Sean Beam, Boromir as the king. That's awesome. I'll watch that all day long. And then he didn't even last the end of... I don't even think he lasted the whole first season, because if I remember, that wasn't even the season finale. That was probably like the second to last episode. So he didn't even last the whole first season. So yeah, I quit the show after that because I was pissed. But of course I came back, and I'm glad I did, because it was a great show. And regardless of whether or not any of these predictions come true, it's irrelevant. I love the show, as you do, I'm sure. And I can't wait to see how it plays out. It's going to be awesome either way.